What's up, Bitcoiners? Sun, super bright, super up. Kathy Wood from ARK Invest did us a favor today and noticed that Bitcoin has been running just fine for weeks, despite the global chaos and markets and crypto falling apart. Just for tonight, I checked, it's running. We're good, right? Bitcoin is fine. We got no problems with Bitcoin, right? So we can have our coffee, talk about all the news. It's a newsy day. Ohio Bitcoin Graffiti. Good morning, Joe. Morning, Shell family. Yeah, Kathy Wood did it. She said, here was her exact quote, right? The Bitcoin blockchain didn't skip a beat during the crisis, Kathy Wood, ARK Invest. I've mentioned that system that I created years ago at CoinDesk called market interest, which was a way to measure all other blockchains by using Bitcoin as the true metric for crypto economic forces. So we put Bitcoin as the numeraire, basically, and 50 different data points, and then we just measured every chain versus Bitcoin. She was totally down with it. I pitched the whole idea to her before we launched it at CoinDesk, and she was going to be on our sort of like board that we created or advisory, whatever. And she was going to be the one. She was a part of it. There's a few other like amazing names that were going to be a part of it, but we got cold feet. It was the last bear market. Everyone was still on about the stupid market cap thing, and it probably would have killed crypto even in the early days. So I get why people were against it. I got a lot of shit on GitHub by the ETH heads about that thing because it told the truth, right? So not everyone's into the truth. We love to start the show with funny news, right? This is the funniest thing I could find. Remember, CNN is not quite the comedic treasure trove that it used to be. So in order to prepare for the show, I don't even look at CNN anymore. They're trying to do the straight news, and I guess they're okay at it. They left the comedy behind, though, unfortunately. But MSNBC, always there. So MSNBC, you guys heard about this prisoner swap, everyone going on about it, right? I don't give a shit about, I think I disagree with the choice, but I'm not going to get all upset about it. And, it could have been a Marine. It could have been this and that. Yeah, true. I do like that they just came out and said the truth, that they chose Brittney Griner for her attributes, let's say, right? Her gender, her sexuality, her skin color. That was all what they said straight up. That's what they wanted, right? So I'm not complaining about that. Right? I'm glad they said it out loud, and this is not. We're not here to complain about who was traded for the arms dealer and who went which way and all that stuff, right? What we're here to talk about quickly, though, is the MSNBC article about it, right? So we don't care. I don't anyway about who was traded. I'm very appreciative that it was explicitly said out loud. They didn't hide it. They chose her for the reasons that they valued, right? The Karine Jean-Pierre said what she valued. She came out and said it. She said they valued her gender, skin color, those things, right? And the other guy, they didn't value that. So we're not complaining about that. That's what they said. We're here to laugh, right? This is comedy time. This is Moscow time, right? Moscow time. What's Moscow time? So MSNBC says she's freed, Brittney Griner. Brittney Griner is finally freed, but her peril is that of Black women in America. The conditions that brought the U.S. basketball player to Russia in the first place are perhaps what have kept her there so long, reflect the vulnerability that often comes with being a Black woman. So they're trying to make her a victim here, right? She came home, but she's a victim. And Clay Travis, I think, put it best. Brittney Griner broke Russian law and was arrested and convicted for it, and then we gave up an international terrorist to get her back. If this isn't privilege, I don't know what is. Maybe we should have left her in Russia so she'd be safer, according to the MSNBC. That's the truth right there, right? So again, we're not here to complain who they chose. It wasn't a white guy. I don't care, right? A hero, I don't care. They valued her. They went with it, and that's totally fine. But this idea that she is now she's a victim, there's no more privilege you could get. Your country traded an arms dealer for you. That's enough. That's enough. That's a good deal. Right? It's a good deal. Yeah, they couldn't. We got Joe. They couldn't help themselves. No, they couldn't. They couldn't. I don't know if any of you guys caught this, but Elon Musk yesterday went on stage with Dave Chappelle in an arena, the Citibank Arena in San Francisco. So he went to the Citibank Arena in San Francisco, sold out crowd, people in the rafters. What is that? 20,000 people or whatever. He goes in now. I listened to it. Some people had taken shots from the crowd and stuff, and it was last night. So I haven't seen a full video, but I've seen it from a few angles from a few different people this morning on Twitter. Everyone says he was getting booed, right? And the reaction is, ha, 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 he's getting booed. Ha, 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 right? Look at, he's getting booed. It's actually really important about how he dealt with that booing, and we're going to talk about it in a second. But what I liked about the optics, was Dave Chappelle bringing this fella in, and so people have to just deal with it, right? So there was booing, and I heard cheering in the crowd too. It wasn't a straight boo. They made a few jokes about it. Dave Chappelle said, "This guy's not even trying to die on Earth, and you're giving him a hard time." and so he was sort of trying to massage the crowd and just let them hang there for a while. He didn't say anything and just let them react, and they could vent and all those things. Dave Chappelle said, "I think some of these people in the crowd must have been the people at Twitter that you fired, right?" But again, I heard cheers in the crowd. It wasn't pure booing. But the good news about it is we talk a lot about this show, about the two solitudes, about the echo chambers that everyone finds them in, and how much those echo chambers are encouraged to exist, how much those echo chambers are actually trying to attract more people into them to get them caught in the echo chamber. And the echo chambers are growing, the echo chambers are coming further apart. But anytime you get to, even the echo chambers you see with Trump, this is what I said, when Trump brought or we had the people over with Kanye, and we're going to talk about Ye today. When you had those over, everyone said, "Oh, it was a scam," and everyone knows it. Well, Trump's own people know it, right? But we live in these two echo chambers. The other folks, that's why I said it's dead meat for Trump. The people that already follow him, that's not extra votes that he needs, right? They're going to see it for what it is. But the other people in the other echo chamber are going to get abused and lied to and told things, and they're going to believe all of this, that he dines with white supremacists. And so it was always a kill shot. I said it from the start that it was a kill shot. While other people can deny the reality, we're not here to talk about reality at all, right? We're just here to talk about how people will react to things. It's not true, right? Who cares about the truth? That we're not in a truth world here. That they would react to it as if he did just dine with white supremacists was enough to kill him, right? Everyone in the middle that's still watching the news, when they saw that, it's over. So you do get caught in these two things. But that's what's so great about Elon coming out on stage yesterday with Dave Chappelle. And that's what's so great about people like Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle exists outside of these two echo chambers. He's one of the last people that is capable, despite some of the cancellation against him on Netflix and the things that he says and all that, he still is able to reach people across these solitudes and these echo chambers. Ye, to a certain extent as well. I'd say recently he's closed off of a lot of those, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But nevertheless, piercing over is really helpful. And Ana Navarro, CNN talent, said the same thing, right? She's a little annoyed by it, but here's what she said on Twitter. On top of all the other crazy things going on Twitter, since Josh, I don't know why I put Josh Molina took over, timelines are now full of accounts we don't follow. I assume this is happening to everyone, not just me. Is there some way of stopping this at least, or decreasing this? So I remember when I was always being asked to follow Vitalik, or asked to follow Nancy Pelosi, or people that I would never follow. I don't need to follow these people. And they were getting pumped to me all the time. And now I would say it's the opposite. Since Elon took over, I don't see these names as much as I used to. But Ana Navarro is seeing it. And I'd say that's probably a good thing, right? If the suggestions start pushing other folks on the left to start seeing voices outside of the echo chamber, it's probably a great thing. I would say I would still appreciate some notifications and suggestions to follow people across the aisle. I know that Twitter's own community notes thing is looking to seek out notes that do, or tweets that do pass through these two solitudes and echo chambers, and counts more a point of view that gets retweeted across the aisle, let's say, than it does echo chamber stuff just getting voted up or down. Not that you can vote down in Twitter, but you know what I mean. You can ratio, you can do those things, right? So what I see is some of this stuff wiggling loose, right? Some of the stuff wiggling loose and, you know, becoming helpful. Now, let's talk quickly about Elon and the booing and why that's so important, right? Why Elon going in front of a crowd and getting booed is such a great thing, right? I mean, a really great thing. So one of the, I guess, central tenets to being a Bitcoiner, especially in a bear market, and I've been through a few of these now, right? I've been through a few of these. So what Elon went through is very similar to what I think a lot of people in Bitcoin right now, precisely now, experience out with the general public. And that is, you know, oh, that thing, you know, because we get sort of looped in with crypto, and crypto is so cringe now because of SBF. And some people say, oh, Bitcoin, you know, I'm not talking about people who know what's going on, right? So I'm talking about just normal people you might come across. Maybe you saw them at Thanksgiving, family, old friends you haven't talked to in a while. Not people who are part of your inner Bitcoin community or circle. I mean, just the normies, right? And the normies right now, of course, think Bitcoin's embarrassing and it's no good and it's so slow and stupid and everyone's a criminal, just like in crypto, and their scams and oh, it's happening, right? We gotta be honest, it's happening. And it was worse years ago. And the thing that I developed, and I have this sort of naturally, but I recommend all of you develop it as well, because Elon put on display why it's such a superpower. Elon doesn't get embarrassed. There's no embarrassment there, right? He can't, it doesn't seem like he can feel embarrassment. Now, I'm sure in some circumstances he can, but even if you remember when Ye posted the note about his unattractive, older, a little, he had a bit of adipose fat in his belly, a bit beer belly, you know, he had a bit of the, not the blubber stuff, but the stuff that makes your belly get round and kind of swollen, the inside fat. And he was diving into off some yacht, and Ye, just before he was kicked off Twitter, posted that picture, and Elon responded and said, look, I'm not kicking him off for the picture thing. I'm kicking him off for the Raelian symbol. If you remember, it was the swastika inside of the Star of David, which we talked about on the show when it happened, the Raelian religion thing. So he had to even come out and say, I don't mind the picture. And what he went on to say was actually that picture that had already went viral before, because people have seen that picture when it first came out and people have mentioned it before, and then Kanye did it. That picture, you know, he dealt with it the right way. He said, look, that motivated me to lift weights and be healthier and get more in shape. So again, I think Elon is one of those people who have experienced the type of ego death, right? I would even say, you know, people always say Trump, so much ego, oh my goodness, right? Only someone who has experienced a form of ego death can go through what Trump went through during his first presidency. And even now, just the hatred, the yelling and screaming. You know, Trump in real life, I'm told, I've never met Trump in real life, but I've met enough people who have and spent one-on-one time with him, pre-president, during presidency, and they all say the same thing. You know, when you're with him, it's 100% attention on you, and you don't feel the ego. The ego, of course, has always been just a tool that he uses to communicate. It's part of the persuasion. It's part of the whole artist's kit, let's say. I continue to believe that if Trump does the taint, you know, the Andrew Tate tactic, when he got kicked off, he just did all the podcasts and then people gave him attention. Ye is doing something very similar, right? Where you go on some shows, even if you can't use the social media, if you go on the show, they'll make a bunch of clips and it'll be like you're there. When Andrew Tate was kicked off and canceled, he became more relevant than ever because he took this approach. And I would say back in September, I didn't think much of Andrew Tate. I thought he was okay, but I didn't think he was bringing anything amazing to the table. We talked a bit about having him speak at one of our events when Bitcoin Magazine did its event back in Amsterdam. You know, there was talk about having him. I said, I don't know. I don't see it yet, right? I'm not really there. I still don't think he's, you know, I disagree with him about a million things, of course, right? But I acknowledge now, months later, that he did innovate, which is this tactic to get away from being canceled, which is to go on these podcasts, get them to create content. He actually resisted and grew when they canceled him. I still think Trump can do that. I don't think he's going to. I think he's spent and the power isn't there, and his weaker points are coming out. But he's getting ignored by the media. He's not gathering the energy. He's not gathering the attention like he once did. But as I said, this ego death thing that I'm told he has in real life, can't be embarrassed, right? Will do what he needs to do and will live through any embarrassment. I'm told that would come out, or at least I think that would come out if he went and did this podcast tour. If he went on Joe Rogan, he went on all kinds of different podcasts, you'd see a different side of him that is there and isn't this whole bombastic thing. Now, I don't care about the Trump piece, right? I'm not here to give Trump ideas, and if he doesn't do it, I don't give a shit. And I'm not supporting Trump 2024 at all. We're a Fetterman 2024 show, right? We love Fetterman 2024 or Ye. We're going to talk about Ye in a second, right? But that's still got issues, of course. But it's a Fetterman, officially a Fetterman 2024, or Biden if he can make it, right? But we like Fetterman 2024. So Trump, we don't care. But the ego thing is what I want to talk about. And I think that's really important, right? I think Bitcoiners, that's why we're so good at killing heroes and killing people and erasing the people that are no longer useful to Bitcoin. Because the minute someone's ego gets involved, it seems to hamper them in this Bitcoin game, right? The minute you start putting your ego ahead of what the network is and what the network promotes and where the network is going to lead us to, as soon as you do that, it seems to show and it seems to ruin people, right? We've seen it again and again. And now that doesn't mean you can't be bombastic. It doesn't mean you can't have an ego, right? Having an ego is one thing. Having an ego is just another tool. It's a button that you should be able to turn on and off, right? I have a total ego, like a total ego, right? But the difference is I can turn it on and off, right? I can't get embarrassed. People can make fun of me. I've been in debates with super hostile crowds. I've been booed by thousands of people live before, well, hundreds of people live before, but almost like 1,000 people live in a live thing, and just getting booed and booed and booed, and I don't care, right? I've seen Trump do that. If you ever want to see one of the most amazing speeches, I think I brought it up here before, when Trump debated Hillary at the Trinity Church or Cathedral on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It's a debate they do every year before the presidential election, where the two candidates come with the bishop or whatever, and they debate. And I'm telling you, if you ever want to feel like a Dave Chappelle, Andy Kaufman situation where the audience is part of the performance and their discomfort is part of the show, that the person speaking makes them so uncomfortable that it's part of the experience. Trump, in one of the most amazing debates you'll ever see, this is candidate Trump, did this to Hillary Clinton, and the audience that was there, they weren't used to this. They weren't used to reality and really uncomfortable things being brought up in what was supposed to be a fun environment, right? But he said, this isn't fun. Like, this is a cutthroat business. And he went, and you can hear them booing because it's so rude. They're booing him, and they're so angry that he's saying these things, and it's so uncomfortable. And he doubles down, right? When you think it couldn't get more uncomfortable, he does it, right? He says, we're in a church, and we got Hillary, but she hates you. She hates everyone here. She hates the building, and just really, really rude stuff. And Hillary went first, and she didn't play that way. He did it, right? So, but then you see the skill, right? He gets through the piece where everyone's booing him, and he actually wins them back. He wins them back, right? And you couldn't do that, I think, unless you're one of these ego death people. And what I see with Elon is one of these ego death situations, right? I think he can be teased. I think you can say almost anything you want to the guy, and it won't matter. Anyway, all that to say, that ego death piece, very important for us Bitcoiners as we move forward, right? It's already been an important part of where we came from. Don't forget, the thing that we're doing here was insane when it was started, and still pretty crazy, right? It was nuts. It was like, okay, we're going to change the whole financial system, and all right, okay, I'm free weekends. I think I can mix that in to my schedule, right? I got some free time. That's what it was. So, if you'd have said it like many of us did 10 years ago, they thought you were absolutely insane, right? So you have to have a bit of this to go forward. You have to be able to admit we might be wrong. We might be wrong, right? We always got to say that as Bitcoiners. We might be wrong. We might be wrong. And we have to have the flexibility to get criticized and not let it bother us. We have to be so sure, even though we might be wrong, we have to be so sure, despite the potential that we're wrong, we have to be so sure that it's worth doing. And no matter what happens, right? People laugh at you, all that stuff, right? You got to just shrug it off like it doesn't matter, right? We have no choice. That's the way of this whole thing that we're doing. So what I saw from Elon last night, the ego death piece, what I've seen from other people out there, what we've experienced as Bitcoiners, vital, vital, vital. Now, I get why there's all this talk about ego and Musk and what's going on. MSNBC had an article today, right? Again, we love them for the comedy, right? They say it's an emerging reality that Twitter is being run as a dictatorship, and like any dictator, Elon Musk appears sensitive about his power and arbitrary in his judgment. So now they're saying you should criticize him, which I think is valid, right? I think Elon, in the position that he's in, needs scrutiny. Of course, no one is saying let Elon get away with whatever he's doing, right? New York Times goes even further. The New York Times here says a political theory of King Elon Musk, and they had a whole article today, right, on King Elon Musk. And here's one quote: "Will the metaverse develop to a point where it matters more who rules social media kingdoms than who occupies the White House? That's why I've been saying it's important to question and criticize Musk." This is coming from Jeff Pilkington, and I think he's the person who wrote this article. So I agree with that, right? I agree that it is appropriate to question them and think about it, and even more so, it's not even about appropriate. You should have increased scrutiny on someone like Elon Musk. We would not criticize that. Elon Musk does not get a free pass. He does not get, just because he does stuff that we like doesn't mean, and because he's funny doesn't mean, and he builds rockets and he builds cool things and he shit posts and is a funny tweeter and holds a bunch of Bitcoin. None of that means that we have to just give him a free pass, right? You've got to scrutinize him and challenge him. And I think that's great, right? There's no problem with that. But it isn't that simple, right? It isn't that simple. A lot of the criticisms towards him right now are things that are just being brought off the shelf, taken off the shelf, and just fired at him, like the same weapons that were used against Trump, the same weapons that are used against anyone who disagrees with the narrative, really, right? So yesterday, Elon talked about his pronouns as a joke about Fauci, right? He says, "My pronouns are prosecute/Fauci." Everyone going crazy, right? Oh my God, what's Elon saying? So this is someone saying, "Elon, please don't mock and promote hate toward already marginalized and at risk of violent members of LGBTQ plus community. They are real people with real feelings. Furthermore, Dr. Fauci is a dedicated public servant whose sole motivation was saving lives." Now, as you know on this show, we are very, very pro LGBTQ plus and the pronoun thing. We're okay with the pronoun thing, right? But Elon gets it right here. Elon says, "I strongly disagree. Forcing your pronouns upon others when they didn't ask and implicitly ostracizing those who don't is neither good nor kind to anyone. As for Fauci, he lied to Congress and funded gain-of-function research that killed millions of people. Not awesome, in my opinion." So forget the Fauci thing. Just go back to the pronoun thing. He gets it right here, right? I'm aligned with him on this one. Anyone who asks me, anyone ever who asks me, this is my pronoun, I will never fail to acknowledge it, right? Never, never, never. All I ask is that if I get it wrong, if I make a mistake, if I'm at a coffee shop and I don't know and no one asked, don't be mad at me, right? If I messed up, please forgive me. That's all I've ever asked for, right? And I don't want any legal infrastructure in there that could penalize someone for getting this wrong. I never wanted that. So I'm aligned with Jordan Peterson from the beginning, how we handled this, right? From the beginning, it was, let's not make laws that would penalize people in this instance, that would make people guilty for getting it wrong or have any unintended consequences. Let's just make this about not being a dick and a jerk to your fellow person, and I can live with that. And that remains where I am, right? I'm in the position to this day where I say, all right, anyone out there, I believe that this is important. If you are not comfortable in your skin, I'm there for you. I'm 100%. I will do my best to never make a mistake. I take it 100% seriously. I know it's fundamental to character, absolutely not in question, right? But Elon has it right? I think you can make a joke about pronouns, right? My pronouns are prosecute and Fauci. I mean, I don't see the problem, right? People don't understand humor, I guess. I think that's fine. And even the way he disagrees, like forcing your pronouns on other, I'm not into the forcing them, right? Or ostracizing someone if they're not into acknowledging that stuff. I'll do that a little. When I hear conservatives who outright refuse, like with the Elliot Page situation, like I disagree 100% with Jordan Peterson, and I think he's been losing the script since he picked that fight with Elliot Page. Now, I don't agree with Elliot Page about anything under the sun. Don't like his work. Don't watch the shows. Don't watch the movies, just because, not out of personal anything. It's just not my thing, right? I think Elliot Page was in some movies that I saw before, or when he was Ellen Page, and I liked some of them. I guess I'm not really into that kind of stuff, but again, I totally disagree with the person. I can even see what Jordan Peterson's point was after, when he made it. He says, "Oh, this is a promotion. I'm not sure, right? You're trying to lure people in." I had enough time to listen to his explanation and say, okay, I didn't think of it from that point of view necessarily. I kind of see your point, but I still would disagree. And I think it's, I think it's relevant, and that's the way to handle it, right? But Cernovich has it right? Cernovich has it right here, because he reacts to all this and he says conservatives lose because they cry about rigged elections instead of learning about how to ballot harvest. Pronoun stuff is pretty stupid in terms of people having to use them, but also in not realizing it's bread and circus issue. That's why you're allowed to have these debates, right? So exactly, right? Now that it's here and it's used as bread and circus, you don't worry about what the stuff that I just said, this way and that way. That should be enough to just leave it, right? All the constant debates serve a political purpose, and it's bread and circuses. So if you fall into the trap, right, you're just dealing with people who have already had their brains persuaded to see the world in these terms. So you'll fall into the different teams as they play the combat sport, right? And that's kind of what you want to avoid. You don't want to be arguing something that you can't win. Like, even if the conservatives get it right, they're going to lose, right? And even if they get it right about pronouns, they're going to lose. People will hate them, right? They already do hate them for that, and I understand why. It's childish of them to make such an issue about it all the time, because they're just playing into the bread and circus thing, right? So, but that's not the only one out there, right? The Hitler thing is another one of these pre-programmed battle lines, and it's used all the time, right? People get poisoned because we just constantly compare things to Nazis and Hitler and all this. Vindeman, if you remember who Vindeman is, right? Alexander Vindeman, he was the one who blew the whistle on Trump's perfect phone call with Zelensky that led to his initial, his first impeachment. And if you remember, it was find out about Hunter Biden and Burisma and all this stuff, or else I won't give you money that you need to deal with Russia or whatever, right? And Vindeman said, oh, you can't do that. Meanwhile, look, Vindeman, that's a president's job. The president's job is to literally negotiate all the time and to protect U.S. elections, even if he's a candidate, right? So if the other candidate is going to get, there is some kind of bribery or pressure they can put on him, well, it's got to be public, right? So, but Vindeman said no. So now Vindeman is saying that Elon, right? Elon, here he goes. Twitter is dying. That's okay. If anything, it needs to be killed off soonest. Elon Musk cannot be allowed to promote dangerous, radical views, hate speech. Imagine Goebbels with a bigger platform and a wider reach. So we have reached the Elon Musk is worse than the Nazis actually stage in the discourse, says Jerry Christmas, right? Actually, actually. And that whole Hitler thing is poison, in the sense that it just gets used again and again. Everybody's Hitler, right? Everyone's Hitler, which is why the yay approach is so powerful, right? There's only one candidate out there trying to weaken the attack vector of you're Nazis, you're Hitler. And I think if he gets it right, he can erase it for everybody, right? You can take away the effectiveness for everyone. And that's a line of change that would be really appropriate for the environment we're in now. So people can sit there and say, oh, yay, you know, what's he doing talking about Nazis? It's so bad. It's the most terrible thing I've ever heard in my life. Oh my God. But remember, the game here is to stop people from using it as a dividing line for more bread and circuses, right? That's the use of it. Does anyone actually think that Ye is out promoting National Socialism? Is he going to like restart the party and the policies, and he's going to become a white supremacist promoter? Is that really what we're going with? Right? Is that the logic? Because from what I continue to see is obvious. Now, he's telling you that he is these things. So I'm not trying to get in the way of you reacting to Ye the way he's asked you to react. So all I'm saying is I think the story is going to change, and I see it from one level up, which is getting rid of this poison that we all have to live with, right? Remember, I worked for Stephen Harper in the Canadian political situation. He became prime minister in 2006 and stayed prime minister to 2015. He was called Hitler for the years before he was elected, the whole time he was prime minister, and is still brought up to this day the way Trump is brought up in America as Hitler. Now, understand who this guy was. He was the biggest Zionist I've ever met. I mean, he's a 100% pro-Israel kind of guy, like Trump, right? You know, Jewish friends, homosexual friends, I mean, everything, right? He was a normal, academically inclined, cosmopolitan Canadian, right? Nothing Hitler about the guy. Yeah, he had like a rigid, sort of conservative style and aesthetic about him, right? But that's clothing. It's hairstyle. Right? It's nothing else but hairstyle. Now I get the hairstyle was a big thing, and you know, mustache style and all that with the Nazis, and as Ye even said, you know, they had the nice clothes and all that stuff. You know, I think most people know I hate those things. Everyone hates that aesthetic. That aesthetic has been clear as one of the worst signs of their evil ways, I guess you could say, right? You know, the leather suits, they're used as villains in so many Hollywood movies, and I think appropriately, right? But it's poisoned our ability to see things rationally. And there's only one person, especially because we're a generation removed from the people who were actually in that environment and knew the nuances and the details, and didn't just push it into these two echo chambers of extremes. So the people who knew it at the time were able to handle the issues a little better. Not that there's confusion that the guy is evil, right? That's not what we're saying. The problem is we're generations now removed, and it's just used as a weapon. And there's only one person out there trying to disarm that weapon. There's only one candidate who's even close, and it's Ye. And I think it's important. Maybe he'll fail this time, but the conversation remains vital, I think, right? I think. So now, going back to the Elon is king stuff, right? So Elon is king. What does this mean? Well, today in the board, right, we talk a lot about, and this is sort of the sovereign individual's frame for the way the world will change. They talk a lot about how this was the form before the printing press. This is feudalism, right? You've got lords and the crown on top, then you've got the physical infrastructure. These were the farms and castles that helped protect the fiefdoms. Weapons, of course, and professional armies. You had knights that swore fealty to their lord and their feudal kingdom. And then, of course, the people who worked the land and were the building block for this whole thing to happen, because they had to feed these knights, they had to feed this town, and they had to make sure the king had revenue, right? That's where that whole stuff comes from. When they created the printing press, what it actually did was it made these smaller armies less relevant and these physical smaller fiefdoms less relevant, because kings or politicians could now nationalize and make a larger territory with more efficient armies, and that there's one centralized army, and a few centralized institutions could help protect the law, the legal rights to property, and all these things. So nationalism grew out of that and was the big change that happened with the printing press, right? It took away power from distributed networks of lords that had to come together with their own armies and their own small areas to create a larger cohesive unit, which sometimes people thought of as countries, but weren't really. Like France at that time, not really our modern idea of a nation state, just a bunch of lords that didn't want to fight because they were in the same geographical area and work together to give power to one king who would help them from fighting each other, just like in England, right? So these are not the same, and each fiefdom had very different aesthetic, very different uniforms for their knights, right? The knights would wear regalia that would associate them with their lord. It looked a little bit more like we have the World Cup going on now, right? The World Cup going on now. It would be more like if it was all the club teams, in the sense that each little town had a team and people could come from anywhere to be a knight to work for them. They had their own uniforms for that local club team. It wasn't a national uniform. There was, if you work for this king or this lord, you know, you might have a feather or some kind of a thing on your knight armor, and that would denote your team. And it wasn't uniforms that were like what the British had later, the red coats that denoted the team on a national level, right? They were local teams. The national team thing came later. Now, a lot of people think that, and this is what the sovereign individual predicts, that we'll go from feudalism to nationalism. And then when nationalism collapses in the same reordering, that it'll turn more into a type of feudalism again, a type of federated oligopoly where normal people like Musk can be sovereigns, right? Remember the word sovereign individual. Sovereigns are the kings. Sovereigns are the kings, right? And even the Bitcoin network, the peer-to-peer network, well, the lords in the feudal system, right? It's kings and lords. The lords in the feudal system are peers. That's where the word peer comes from in the English language. The word peer in the English language comes from the lords who are peers with each other. It's called peerage. All these titles you see in England, that's all peerage, right? Those are peers with each other. The people below them, not peers. You're not the peer of a lord if you're not a lord. You're not the peer of an earl if you're not an earl, or a count or whatever. These are peers, peerage, knights, all of that. So the peers in this case, right? We've got peers, we've got kings. You know, Elon Musk, certainly a king, his own type of king, right? And remember, the revolutions themselves begin on the same date. It's just a simulation thing, right? It's a coincidence. We've got October 31st, 1517 is when the Protestant Reformation began with Martin Luther, and he published the edicts, which helped separate church and state. Well, on 2008, same day, October 31st, the Bitcoin white paper, the peer-to-peer paper was peer-to-peer electronic cash paper was released, and is the marker for the beginning of the separation of money and state. You know, some people see it analogous to that. That's why these big triggers, which were predicted in the book Sovereign Individual, written in the 1990s, seem to have been fulfilled when the paper came out, because we can now see the formula to have a revolution of this scale in the times that we're living in now. And when you see these types of kings arise, right, like an Elon Musk, that really does fit in the worldview that the Sovereign Individual writers offered us, which has helped guide a lot of Bitcoiners from the early days on where this could all head and what we're fighting for and where we're going to go and what it's going to look like. And one of the main predictions in the Sovereign Individual was that individuals would rise to this level of being almost like superhuman king-like figures, and that the state would actually target them and attack them. The same way, and he referenced bin Laden, who hadn't even done 9/11 yet. This was still the bin Laden of '94 that they were attacking with the Black Hawk Down stuff in Mogadishu, Somalia. If you saw that movie or remember that story. Bin Laden had one idea to participate at that Black Hawk Down thing, by the way, and it was morbid and disgusting. He's the one who drove all the way to Mogadishu and said, why don't you drag them on the back of the truck and their body parts will... And America won't be able to handle that. They'll run home. They can't handle the gruesomeness of what we're willing to do. And he was right. That was the end. American TV never showed what happened. bin Laden knew it would be so unpalatable that he could actually force Clinton to just run home, because Clinton didn't want that kind of conflict, especially in the 90s when things were going so well. So the book Sovereign Individual predicts that countries will start reacting to individuals like bin Laden, where you'll have a whole nation state attacking a human being. And Elon Musk is getting to that territory now, right? He's getting to the territory where one individual is being treated as an almost threat to the whole order. And it looks like the whole order might actually take aim at him. We've heard the president mention they're going to keep an eye on him. We've heard that same Karine Jean-Pierre, who I mentioned earlier in regards to the Brittney Griner. She's the one who said, we value this person for their, attributes. She even said just a few days ago, which we mentioned on this show, that they're going to keep a close eye on Musk and deal with it because everyone's complaining about it if they need to, right? These are just threats still to this day. They're just threats. But that's the scale we're talking about, right? We're talking about that scale. Now, how are nation states doing these days, right? Well, not so well. Besides all the trouble we have in America with our elections and nobody knows and what's going on, we've got Brazil, right? We talk about Brazil a lot here. So yesterday, Bolsonaro gave a speech. Now remember, just like in America, the president of Brazil has an election and there's a period in which he's still a lame duck leader if they lose or if it's the end of their term, before they become, before the new person is inaugurated. So in this case, Bolsonaro remains the president of Brazil while Lula, who is supposed to be taking over, waits in the wings. But yesterday, he's been getting the biggest protests you can imagine. It's been weeks now, over a month, the hugest protests you've ever seen, the hugest support rallies, million people in the streets, not stopping, parties, everything going on, Amazon people coming saying our vote wasn't registered. And yesterday, Bolsonaro confirmed that he is the supreme chief of the armed forces and that they will back the Brazilian citizens, right? So now we know that this one nation state, Brazil, one of the largest in the world, one of the most important countries in the world, it's part of BRICS, right? They're going to have a situation where it ain't working, right? There's no peaceful transfer of power, probably because there were no decent elections that we can audit or at least have any confidence in the election results, right? Now, I don't have any proof, but it looks like the people there don't have any confidence, and that's why all these protests are going. But I don't have proof. I just know what I see and what people are saying, and it looks pretty fishy to me. You've got everything going on in Iran. Now, one of the amazing things with the Iran situation is, did you know the Gaza folks, the Gaza factions about all this are really upset about the protests in Iran, right? So again, another country, wobbling. Did you see this from the arms dealer that they released, Victor Bout? I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. So he's the guy they traded for the basketball player. And he gave an interview yesterday on Russia Today, the network that is, I think, banned in America because it is Russian propaganda. I mean, for sure. So the interviewer, first of all, was Maria Butina. She was also imprisoned as a spy before in America. So she's back in Russia and she gives this interview. And Victor Bout, first of all, speaks great English. If you haven't seen the interview, he speaks great English. But what he says is really interesting. And he says, I was in prison with all these rural, which I think is a signal for racism, rural Americans, he called them, right? The rural Americans, but I don't know. That's just me mind reading. He says, I was in prison with a lot of rural Americans and they love Russia, right? They're curious. They're not hateful despite the brainwashing and the propaganda. And what he says is, Russian people and American people are natural allies. And they have been for a long time, since pre-Civil War. The European powers were very worried that Lincoln would hook up with the Russians in order to basically conquer the world. And this has been feared by people for a long time, that if American people and Russian people would join forces, the power would be unstoppable, right? I continue to believe America and Russia are natural allies once both of our political leaderships and systems leave. I spent a lot of time in Brooklyn on Coney Island where all the Russians live. I traveled through Russia years ago. I took the train across Russia. I'm not an expert on Russia by any means, but I've been around, met people. I knew the guy that Putin whacked, Boris Nemtsov, right? He was the prime minister before Putin and was one of the folks imprisoned along with the Pussy Riot stories a few years ago, 10 years, 12, 10 years ago now, I guess, those riots, 2012. And he was shot after he came to Canada to solicit support for what he knew was going to be a dangerous mission against Putin back there. He did a bunch of research proving that Putin was the richest person in the world at the time and that he had to be stopped. And he let me know all these, facts you didn't know. All of Putin's, he did like a bunch of research on all of Putin's plastic surgery, So not a lot of people know that, right? But he sort of come up with Putin. He was the prime minister under Yeltsin before Putin, and so was able to see the change in face and was part of his whole shtick on trying to take the bloom off the rose, let's say, 10 years ago of Putin, so that the world would be more keyed into the threat he posed and all those things. So, yeah, the idea that America and Russian people would be a powerful force if they knew it is a little bit like if poor white Americans and poor black Americans understood the power they had if they worked together, right? And not worried about fighting each other because two different billionaires told them they should hate each other. So in a lot of ways, the world we're entering and the world Bitcoiners want to see starts with these citadels, starts with our own, basically, sovereignty, right? Sovereign individuals who, like sovereigns, are kings in their own world, right? Like Elon is starting to suggest here, that there's going to be more kings. The way forward are these huge federated oligopolies, a little bit like what's already in Russia, right? Except that the oligopolies all fall under Putin and a centralized force. Imagine they didn't have that centralizing force. Imagine the Russian oligarchs were all a little bit on their own, with their own energy fiefdoms, with their own capacity. Russia, in some ways, could be the start of a return to a feudal order that focuses on energy and focuses on the local economy and coordinating those things without mischief from Moscow in their case. And in our case, what else is going on? Well, this is the biggest news of the day. It's the biggest news of the whole day, right? We're talking about nation states. We're talking about Elon. We're talking about Russia, prisoner swaps, change of nations. How is it going to work? This is my only worry about this story. The scoop came in the Financial Times, which is not where you put real scoops, right? You put real scoops into the normal news. So my only worry here is that this is from, first of all, a fake news outlet. Second of all, has been picked up since, but started with the Financial Times story. It's the only one I've seen. Fusion energy breakthrough. U.S. scientists have made one of the most significant leaps in decades in the search for the holy grail of energy, limitless carbon-free power, by achieving net energy gain in a fusion reaction. So it's an American breakthrough, right? So that, I think, is already, I've seen this breakthrough before in Italy or in Russia, but this one looks real, right? This one looks real to me, other than the Financial Times part of it, right? That's the only part that doesn't look like a scoop. So here's what they say. U.S. scientists have reportedly carried out the first nuclear fission experiment to achieve a net energy gain, a major breakthrough in a field that has been pursuing such a result since the 1950s, and a potential milestone in the search for a climate-friendly renewable energy source to replace fossil fuels. Even though on this show, we know that plain old nuclear is good enough, especially with the small modular nuclear reactors, especially with them financed through Bitcoin tools, which would allow them to proliferate and not be controlled by government entities and all those other things that would actually allow a commercial spearhead to promote their proliferation in the world, right? So big change. The test involved, this is the fusion test again, the test involved bombarding a pellet of hydrogen plasma with the world's largest laser to trigger a nuclear fusion reaction, the same process which takes place in the sun. Researchers were able to produce 2.5 megajoules of energy, 120% of the 200 megajoules of the 2.1 megajoules used to power the experiment, right? So they got more power out than they put in. Amazing. Literally amazing. And when you start to look at the order of things, right, you start to even see Elon. Elon is one of the first Bitcoin sovereigns in a sense, right? And we're going to see way more of these. He's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see way more of these people. And once you have, and this is how it changes, right? Feudalism, supported by the individuals. Nationalism, again, it's their tax money that pays for this, that pays for that, that allows them to be on the pedestal, right? It's them who pays for the food for these guys to protect this castle that allows them to be on the throne, right? Well, now, the people are not the building blocks anymore in a Bitcoin system. They're not, right? They're in the mix. This is all the reason why it's bi-directional is because it is P2P essentially, right? You've got Bitcoin as the base unit to build this whole architecture. From there, it's people using Bitcoin, people using the Bitcoin to create industries that everyone can use after, because the motivation now is, sure, more Bitcoin. Absolutely, more Bitcoin, right? But because everyone's after the same thing, the coordination is there. If everyone's after dollars, fine. But remember, we can't count dollars. We don't know where they're coming from. You don't know if someone's losing, someone's winning, 2 people are losing, 3 people are winning. We don't know. There's no way to know, right? Again, Bitcoin's main advantage is that we can count it. And the minute you can count it, because you can count it, you can actually manage everything else. We say in management, if you're not measuring, you're not managing, right? That's like a main thing you'll learn if you ever take an MBA class, right? Or an MBA degree. If you're not measuring, you're not managing. We can't measure the fucking money, which means we can't manage anything. We can't manage energy, we can't manage defense, we can't manage information, right? Because there's too many incentives to make money and lie. And because the money itself is not a necessarily a zero-sum situation or trying to become more efficient or any of those things, you can pollute and destroy as many of these industries as you feel like, as long as you get more money, right? And that's the Cantillon effect in a nutshell. Right? That's it in a nutshell. So you get all of these new resources that can be built independent of a nation-state architecture and can allow peer-to-peer networks, again, to proliferate, change the nation-state order, give us free, abundant, or cheap, abundant energy, and the capacity to even use arbitrage, right? Because this system, if you have multiple sovereigns, it goes back to the benefits of feudalism, which is my castle sucks, that farm is better, I'm moving there to farm. Enough of this shit, right? Their knights are abusive to us, right? Any reason you can have to leave one of these feudal structures. So there you go. It's a brave new world, guys. We're moving into a world of Bitcoin sovereigns and peers. Elon looks to be like the first one, or the first one getting in shit for it, at least. There'll be more. There'll be plenty more. So there you go. All right, what do we got? Nation states, yikes. Yeah, they're not great, right? Hello, fellow humans. Hey, Bob the Builder. What's up, Muslim Bitcoiner? Wa alaikum salam. The tweet was a double slam from Bitcoin Graffiti. I have sapiens as my pronoun. Good one, Joe. That one's good. My pronouns are thine. All right, guys. All right, I'll be on at noon with Bitcoin Magazine Live. We'll be doing the news and notes today. So see you then. Peace. See you tomorrow too, here, 8 a.m. every day, guys.